Snowy, dreary day outside, so we need to do something fun inside. Folks, today we're going to make some jerky. Alright, so we got a lot of snow last night, and that's typical. It is winter, and we live in a place where it does in fact snow. So folks, we're gonna do a little throwback, and really for a couple of reasons. In fact, all of our videos at this point on are always gonna have something of a, in fact, I think they always did. There will always be some preparedness element to just about everything we do. And this is one of those things. Now, the situation we find ourselves in, and it's not a bad one, is that we have way more beef out there than we need right now. Michelle's cousin was kind enough to sell us, 3/4 of a beef, and we're not ready for that right now ourselves, so it's nice to know that we have good, clean sources to be able to make that happen. Idea being that we want to take some of that stuff and we want to either preserve it by canning or preserve it by jerky, which is a fun thing to do. And frankly, folks, let me just talk about the jerky industry out there. Don't like it, because you can't find the jerky I grew up on anymore unless it's some old country store. All the jerky right now, it's like it's already been chewed or run through some grinder and then reconstituted, and it's soft. I've always liked the kind where you had to work on it a little bit, where it dissolves in your mouth, where, the stuff I grew up on. So that's exactly what we're gonna make today. Now folks, keep in mind, I'm gonna give you the basic recipe here. You can switch this thing up any way you like. Now, in full disclosure, we use Alton Brown's recipe. I've been using this one for years and years, and I make deviations to it. Now, the only thing that's real critical in this particular recipe is that you get basically equal amounts of Worcestershire and soy sauce. Now, in this particular case, we had to use the higher end stuff because it's gluten-free, and that means a lot to us. So right off the bat, with the amount of meat that we're using, I'm gonna start with, like I said, it's important that first you get equal amounts of those two. So I'm gonna say, let's start with a cup, because I'm not sure how much I have of this stuff. A cup of soy sauce. All right, so we have now a 1.5 cups. William's laughing at me because I mispronounced tamari sauce. So it's a 1.5 cups of that, and a 1.5 cups of Worcestershire. And because I can't stand looking at messes, let me just go ahead and wipe that up right quick. Okay, so folks, that's the important part. Now, the rest of it, you can kind of do in any way you want. We're gonna put some honey in here, and I'm gonna eyeball just about everything. All right, so let's call it about 3 tablespoons of some of this, this awesome honey we pulled out earlier this year. Now, red pepper, well, let me back up a little bit, because a lot of people are not gonna want that. As far as pepper goes, William made this little spoon here, folks, and he insisted that I use it. So here we go. Let's give this thing its maiden run. These are some of the other things we do on these rainy days out here, is take up other crafts and learn different things. Garlic powder. Now, this isn't part of Alton Brown's recipe, but I like it in there. I'd say about 1 tablespoon, maybe a little bit more of that. Onion powder is also important. Cool thing about this is that, yeah, there's a little bit of a sugar content in there, but a lot of this, it's not going to be in there forever. Let me just worry about that later. So we'll just take we'll get a little bit of this onion powder. 2 scoops of that, and then red pepper flakes. Now, this is all going to be, like I said, this is one of those things where a lot of people are not going to want to put that in there. You don't want the spice. And now I'm going to put in, right after this, I'll put in that much right there, because it's primarily going to be me and William eating this and whatever we share with others. I don't know why, but guys just love jerky, and it doesn't matter what it is. Here's the ingredient, at least for this one, that I'm not a big fan of using. In fact, if I had my smoker right now, I wouldn't use it at all. And that is this liquid smoke stuff. I don't like it. I don't like the aftertaste, and frankly, I'm not even sure what's in it in terms of chemicals, but we'll just add a little bit in there. I know the recipe calls for about 1 teaspoon, but essentially tripled it. So we'll just put a bit more in there. A little bit of this stuff goes a long way, believe me. But typically, if I were doing it with a smoker, I would smoke it for, like we've done before, and we've made this so many times that I can't even count it all. And we've made it with everything from buffalo to elk, you name it. Same recipe, same everything. Really not much to it. All right, so now it's just really nothing more than that. Now the honey you put in there is probably gonna situate itself to the bottom. So just get this stuff all mixed up. And then we're gonna set it off to the side once we get it all going. Okay, so this marinade is pretty much all squared away. We're just gonna set this off to the side, then we're gonna break out the meat and we'll talk about that. All right, so let's get down to brass tacks. Let's talk about the meat we're using. Now in this particular case, and let me point out, folks, whenever I do this, I try to make as much as possible because you're gonna lose your butt on ingredients. It's gonna cost you a fortune if you have to put this together every single time. So it's better to make really big batches if you can. And if you got a place to, to use it, or if you got a bunch of guys around, I promise you they're gonna eat it if it tastes right. So we got a bunch of basically rump roast. You want to use the leanest cuts as possible, no matter the animal, when you make jerky. It can have a little bit of fat in there, but the more fat you have, the higher the likelihood of it becoming rancid much sooner. And what I also like to do is it's not completely thawed out. It's like partially frozen. And in full disclosure, folks, I prefer to do this all by hand. I like it thick because it's going to sit on that dehydrator so long that it's not going to matter anyway. But we got this slicer that I haven't used in centuries. Frankly, I think we still lived in Kansas the last time I used this. Now, I'm gonna do it this way, and we may even do some by hand, but the critical thing to understand is you have the grain of the meat. And in this particular case, in this eye of round, which it appears to be, it's going this way. Now, when you do jerky, typically, the way I like to do it is that I'm gonna cut with the grain, not against it. I'm gonna cut with it because I want there to be some bite to it. I wanna be able to work on it. And if you put it this way and you dry it out to the extent that we do, I promise you, when you take it off that dehydrator, it's gonna all turn to dust. And I'll show you why here in a little while. So with that said, we're gonna take it this way. We're gonna stick it on this handy dandy slicer. And like I said, I haven't used this thing in forever, so let's see whether or not it's gonna work. All right, so there we have it. We have about 10 pounds of roughly cut rump roast. And it's really this simple at this point, folks. And like I said, if you're gonna use a slicer, even if you're doing it by hand, it helps if it's halfway frozen, where it's not completely solid, but halfway frozen. So I'm gonna stick a little bit of that in there, put some of this, probably gonna make a little bit of a mess here. I'm gonna mix this up because it's gonna be twice as hard to do later on. So I kind of do it in layers. I don't slop this stuff all over the place. Now, when you put this marinade in, you're gonna want this stuff to set up for at least 6 hours. I let it go overnight because I don't think you can overdo it. I mean, we want that salt, we want this cure to get all the way into everything. So we're gonna give it time. And the cool thing about this, folks, is that when you do it at home, you can make it, now that's considerably thick. That's a lot thicker than anything you're ever gonna find in a regular store. And I like replicating it. There was a guy, and the best jerky I ever had, folks, it was at a gas station. This old timer did it, and it was in DeKalb, Texas. And a little place on the side of the road, you would drive right by it and not think anything about it. The only criticism I had with his jerky, the flavor was absolutely perfect. It was smoked perfectly, and he ran like a smoke shop out of this place. Only complaint I ever had was that it was too soft. Yeah, maybe that's just, maybe that, I won't say, I was gonna say something I probably shouldn't say, but bottom line is, jerky got, over time and years, it seems like the jerky got soft, maybe our country did too. But I digress. Anyway, here we are, we got it all in the bowl right now. And I don't really need to do much more than this. But like I said, let it go for, some say 3 to 6 hours. This stuff is a little thick. I want to make sure it gets in everywhere. We're gonna cover it up. We're gonna stick it in the fridge out in the garage, and we're gonna let this stuff sit overnight. Then then we'll do the next step, which is pretty simple, folks. Like I said, making jerky is not difficult. You can do this at home, and you can do it with just about every animal. So it's the next day, and we let this stuff set up overnight. Like I said, you really just need a few hours, and there are people out there that tell you that anything more than a few hours isn't really penetrating the meat anyway. I don't know that I agree with them. So folks, if you have a dehydrator, you can just set it up like so. And don't be afraid to get them close. You want to try to avoid having them touch, but you want to get them close because as they dehydrate, they're going to shrink up quite a bit. In fact, I kind of even overlay them here on the sides a little bit. Not that big a deal. So we're just going to line this whole tray. You can even take and brush some honey on top of there if you want. Put additional red peppers on top of there if you want to make it hotter, like I'm probably going to do with some of this batch, even though there's some already in the marinade. Really, the sky's the limit. It can go any way you wish. If you don't have a dehydrator, there are other options out there. You can always do this in the oven. Never done it that way. I know a lot of people that have. I prefer to use this dehydrator, and it just makes the whole process, I think, a lot easier, and also the cleanup is easier. So you get the point. Time to move on to the next step. All right, so it's been a day later, and so let's check it out. We've basically got all these frames here, and if you saw when I put them together, they were pretty much touching, but they dry up enough to where everything kind of pulls into itself. Now, I'm gonna go back to what I was talking about in the beginning, where these days, the kind of jerky I grew up on, you just can't find anywhere. You're definitely not gonna find it in the store unless you go to one of those, off the beaten path kind of places, or you make it yourself. But here's how I like it. When I can take it and it's tough and I can tear it off, and it's almost like a potato chip. Now, not everybody's gonna like it that way. That's the way I like it. The next question is undoubtedly gonna be, well, how long will it keep? I have no idea, because around here, this stuff, I would take it to work and it would be gone in minutes. Or, around here, even though we got, I don't even know how many pounds at this point, but we have quite a bit of jerky on this thing. William eats this stuff all day, every day, and I go to it from time to time, but yeah, this can last quite a while if you want. You'll have to look that up on your own, because like I said, as far as figuring out what the shelf life is, it's like getting to the bottom of a Tootsie Roll Pop. We never find out around here. So as far as putting it away, you can take this stuff. We got half-gallon jars that we can put it in, and then you throw an oxygen absorber in there if you want to do it that way. Or you can take this little handy-dandy Ziploc thing, which is going to be more than adequate because it's not going to stick around long enough. But if this is some food preservation method that you might look to keep, there's really no reason, if you put it in a dark place and put an oxygen absorber and pack it tight, there's no telling how long this stuff will keep. But just remember, the pieces that have any fat on them, you want to try to eat those first. You don't necessarily want to preserve them because that fat over time will go rancid. I think this was 10 pounds we started with, and look, it's tiny now. Look at all this. And it was thick. It was super thick. Now we can take this stuff and we can do whatever we want with it. I'll stick it in this Ziploc, but I doubt this stuff's going to make it for more than a week. So there are numerous ways in which you can preserve your harvest, and we're going to cover a few more of them as we go about this. So until next time, this is Billy, the Permaculture Pimp Daddy, where PIMP stands for Permaculture is my passion. And here's one of the reasons why.